here. We're actually going to have you help us get started today with Starbucks, Blake, and then Adam Long.
Yep.
We're going to have you help us with Starbucks today, and Sam Nelson. And Sam.
Scared. We were in the same.
You were worried,
too.
right?
I was like,
you were
oh.
worried. You're like, wait a minute, I took my mulligan.
Yeah.
So, but next week it'll start with Blake. So we'll have Blake, Claire, Logan, Keena, Adam, Taylor, Trent, and Nathan next time. But today for Starbucks, we want to start with Blake. So let me just take a moment and let's sort of just step back for a second and take stock of where we're at in the class. Okay, so we've started with what is strategy, and by now you should know that when you're trying to describe a company strategy, you're trying to address and answer the four key questions around what markets, where are we competing, markets we're competing in. It is, what is our unique value, our value proposition, how are we trying to deliver the unique value is next, so this is our unique value, how we're doing it, which is the resources and capabilities, and then how are we trying to protect it, which is the barriers to imitation. Then we move to looking at this question of, well, why do some firms tend to make more than other firms on a consistent basis? So it's sort of like we're looking at profits here for a firm, we're trying to predict that, and we sort of actually suggested there are, go this way, there are two main drivers of superior profitability at the firm level. One is, I'm in an industry where my choice of markets is really good, and I happen to be competing in an industry where everybody in the industry tends to make more money in this industry than other industries. So I'm in an attractive industry. And Bridger, what are the characteristics of an attractive industry? What framework did we use to help you to understand?
The 5 forces.
5 forces framework. Okay.
Firepower.
Okay. So we've got a framework here. I'm just going to put 5 forces here. This is the framework that helps us to know whether a market or an industry is attractive. And it also helps us to know what we could do if we're trying to shape strategy, how to make a more attractive industry. If we can create buyer power, a power over our buyers, if we can create power over our suppliers, perhaps through industry consolidation, if we can create barriers to entry into our business or reduce the threat of substitutes, those are the kinds of things we want to do to make an industry, our market that we compete in, more attractive for us. Okay, so we've learned this as a framework to understand that industry is one part of why firms make more money. Some firms make more than others. And the other then really gets back to your strategy in that industry or your position in that particular industry, which gets to these things of, well, we offer unique value, we're able to deliver it with resources and capabilities better than others, and we've created some barriers to imitation. So the way firms tend to do this is through one of two generic strategies: cost or differentiation. And you probably have to be really good at offering unique value of cost or differentiation in developing and building the resources and capabilities to be able to do that. Okay, so this sort of, I just want to make sure you understand sort of where we've come. This is sort of where we're at right now. And today we're going to talk about, we're going to continue to go back, and we're going to continue to occasionally look at industry. We're going to always look at firm strategy and try and understand that. Today we're going to look a little bit more specifically at the issue of, okay, I have a strategy, seems to be working, and now I'm looking at ways to grow. And this is a critical strategic issue for firms. And here's why. How many of you have seen something that looks like this before in business? What is that called? The S-curve. What is the S-curve? Yes?
Kind of an outline of growth. So
Okay.
you come out and there's a period of explosive growth, then you hit a maturity and sort of taper off.
This is time. This tends to be sales or market penetration. There are different ways you can think about this. But this is known as the S-curve. And we see it with products. And we see it with businesses. And it basically tells us that pretty much every product is going to go through a growth cycle, and then it's going to mature, and then it's going to decline. Right? If you're a company, if you come up with one product, what does this suggest to you? Yeah, if you rely on the one product, you will decline. Oh, at some point, you are going to hit this point where the product is going to sort of reach its zenith. The market penetration is going to start to decline. And so it means if you want to grow as a company, you've got to put another S-curve on top of the last one with a different product, different service, different ways to get revenue. If you don't continue to put new ones on top of old ones, what happens is basically you're going to hit that inflection point in the S-curve. And what we've seen from research is that when companies start to hit this, they actually start, there's certain ways that you can project and predict when a company's starting to decline. Their stock drops precipitously, usually at least 50% in the next year when the market thinks that you've started to hit that bend in the S-curve. So you want to try and reignite growth if you can. Yes?
So for a product like gasoline, where there's always a high demand, does that follow the same pattern, or is it a little bit different?
It's a good question. So what we expect is we expect to see this pattern. However, what you see with some products is that it looks like this. It's very short-lived, right? It's like something comes on and it's popular for maybe a very short period of time, but then it gets eclipsed by something else. You'll find that others are on a very long trajectory. So there's an interesting question. So for oil, the question would be, at what point do we expect a combination of wind, solar, battery, and other things to begin to take share, and will we actually start to see a bend in that you know, sort of the usage of oil? And I would say at this point, you know, it's still, you know, I don't know that it's growing. I think, you know, it's probably it's flattened a little bit. We're starting to see substitutes come in now, and we'll see. It'll be interesting over the next 30, 40, 50 years whether we see it actually start to bend a little bit more. Yes?
So do investors basically just say, okay, this is the sales growth, and this is now what the sales growth is growing at, and then they just say, this company's reached the inflection point? Because you said that you can tell if a company is hit its inflection point by the stock growth. Well, how do the investors know that?
So what investors will watch is they're going to watch to see they're going to watch your growth in revenues and your growth in customers. And they're going to watch this, and they're going to see if it's going like this, and they're comparing it with other options out there. And they're going to wait, and they're going to see, at some point, it will likely start to bend. When it starts to bend, that's when you see investors quit buying the stock. Because now it's no longer on a growth trajectory, now it's becoming more of a mature company. And so that's why if you are running a company, you don't want to be at the helm when the growth bends. Because what happens is then all of a sudden, investors, instead of projecting you to be up here in the future, they're now projecting you out here with much lower growth, lower profits and cash flows. And that's why the value of a company, the stock tends to drop significantly in the year that we start to see this drop in growth. And that's why you also see, you'll see a company has a poor growth, a particular half year, quarter, half year, even a year. You'll often see unless there's some really good explanation for why there was a drop in growth that particular year or quarter, then you'll often see the stock drops significantly. because we're not sure if this now is a change permanently for the future, that we're going to see lower growth expectations going forward or not.
When a product starts to lose a little bit of their market share, if they add new features to it, would that be a whole new SCurve, or is that just going to be the same SCurve?
It's just extending the S-curve. So there's the issue of it being, is this a brand new product, or is this really just a product line extension? And this is where we want to get to today. And it's sort of like, how do firms think about growing? Because one way is we think about product line extensions. Another way is we think about completely new products. Yeah.
So with the iPhone, where they're constantly like updating it and adding new things and releasing it, people are still buying them in large quantities. Would the only way that S-curve kind of starts to flatten out is if people stop using cell phones?
It would be, yeah, it would be, if you think about, I would say right now we're finally seeing desktop computers starting to bend, right? You folks aren't buying desktop computers, right? But for a long time, people were buying, and then there was a question, well, at what point will people quit buying desktop computers? And a lot of people say, well, people are always going to buy desktop computers, until all of a sudden you see laptops come in, and then you see tablets come in. And so, so now we're starting to see, even though they've still been popular internationally because they're cheaper, we're starting to see that bend in desktop computers. Of course, laptops are still taking off. Tablets are still taking off. What we're seeing is smartphones are taking off, but we're now, probably not too long, we're going to start to see a little bit of decline in non-smartphones, right? So you're seeing one type of cell phone sort of replace a different type of cell phone. Now the question is, are we going to see now a different type of cell phone come in perhaps and replace a smartphone?
So it's when like large innovations take place that kind of change the nature of a certain product.
Yeah. All right, so so let's start with Starbucks and their, just give us an overview of their strategy.
As far as the market that they compete in.
Okay.
Right now it's mostly a national market, and it's targeting all coffee consumers, so all people who would want to drink coffee in the morning.
Okay, so this is basically coffee retailing, okay, and largely U.S. but starting to expand internationally.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the unique value is they offer like specialty coffee in a kind of a coffee bar that gives you an experience too. So it's like got like a living room lounge feeling that's really comfortable and makes people want to stay there and enjoy it.
Okay, so there's sort of two dimensions. One is specialty coffee. Second, though, is that they're providing this sort of atmosphere as well, in terms as a place to sit down and meet, friends or other people that you may want to just hang out with for a while and have coffee. Okay. How do they deliver that? What are their resources and capabilities?
Yeah, so their resources, the biggest one I think is their brand.
Okay.
And then they are also known for having really helpful staff, the people that they employ, to help their customers a lot. They have a ton of store locations.
So resources would be brand, would be a resource. Helpful staff, how do you think about that? Do they just happen to find people that are more helpful than the average person? Is it training?
So they train them.
Okay, so this would be a capability at training. So they're good at training. But people would also think about that as maybe recruiting and then training baristas. Okay. And then you mentioned locations.
Yeah, locations.
And that would be a resource. They've been able to build lots and lots of these locations. Some people would say there's a capability tied to that.
Yeah, actually, I put that they have a great capability of being able to find new locations and make them work even if they're not the perfect white box store.
Yeah, so they're really good at sort of finding the best locations for the stores, and then of course, not only building the stores, but you could argue there's sort of creating the ambiance, the atmosphere there. Okay.
And And then I think another capability that they have is they're really good at negotiating these specialty sales.
Okay. Tell me more about what's a specialty cell.
Yes, so like for example, they're doing this ice cream line with Dyer. And there's a whole list of them in here. I think that they do one with an airline and then they do one with United Airlines, Nordstrom, Barnes and Noble's, basically all these companies that they pair with.
Okay.
Help them promote their product and stuff there.
So when we think about these, the way they're looking at growing, one of those groups of types of customers, I would say Nordstrom, airlines, that's a little bit different than the Dyer's coffee. How would you say it's different?
That's a new product.
John?
Because in the ice cream example, it's a different product, and they're not selling coffee, whereas the U.S. Airlines or Nordstrom, it's just putting their actual product into another location.
Okay, so we think about these as, these are distribution channel alliances where we're finding new outlets to sell our coffee, but we're still selling our coffee product, right? So whether it's airlines, whether it's, now you could argue with Nordstrom, they may have done some different blends. So they actually might have created some specific unique products for Nordstrom. But for the most part, these are finding new channels to sell their coffee. Whereas, in fact, the Dyer's is actually the creation of it's a non-coffee product. I mean, it does use coffee in the ice cream, of course, but it's reaching a different type of customer. So this is around creating a new product. Frappuccino would be the same kind of thing, right? It would be creating a new product with Pepsi that is not your traditional coffee product. And in that case, they actually also can tap into Pepsi's distribution as well. So they sort of get both distribution. So one is around distribution channels, the other is around new products. And we might think about these as alliances or partnerships. We'll talk about more about partnerships and alliances in the next couple of weeks. All right. And last, Blake, what makes it hard to imitate what Starbucks does?
Yeah, so I think this one's a little bit harder because it's pretty easy for people to rent a space instead of a coffee shop. But they talked about how they have like this secret recipe to roasting their beans, and I think that that's something that gives them a big competitive advantage.
Okay, so this would be another capability then that they have that would be important, would be this roasting of the beans and creating the blends would be an important capability that others would have to be able to imitate. And if you can't imitate the way they roast and blend the beans, then your coffee isn't going to taste like their coffee. Okay, so this may be one of the key capabilities that prevents imitation. Maybe you could go in and try and hire people away that work in Starbucks where they blend their beans, and maybe they know how they do it. But you still have to deal with building brand, of course, and they also they have a lot of locations as well. All right. Yes.
I think another big one was the relationship they have with suppliers.
Okay. So we think about. Tell me more about that. Why is that important?
Well, it talked a lot about how the relationship was really positive and how they were both willing to work with each other, and that if there was a shortage in coffee, that they were going to give Starbucks the primary bulk of their load, and so they got their product first.
So Starbucks then we would expect, have sort of favored access to the best beans. And Alicia, why do you think they get it over others?
Because they're a huge buyer.
Because they're a huge buyer. Yeah, so it's a bargaining power story now, at least. Now they might have done some things early on to build a relationship, but they've got this relationship with suppliers, but you could also argue they've got a lot of bargaining power with suppliers because of just the sheer volume of coffee beans that they're Parker?
Just the same way of roasting their beans and the recipe, if you will, to do that. Specifically with the idea of being in fear of other companies taking their employees away and copying them. they have elements that are integrated into software and sort of automated. That so it's pieced in a way that employees can't go in, learn it, and then
Take the whole thing, yeah. It's not like someone could easily take the recipe
Yeah.
and go say, I know how to do a Starbucks, make a Starbucks cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so I want to move, yes, Amy.
Sorry. I also think that a lot of the things that you put on the board, I guess, could be summed up in like their first mover advantage.
Okay.
So they were the first ones to get to the locations. They were the first ones to do the carts that you could do at like train stations and stuff. And they were also sort of the first ones to move internationally too. So that would help with brand.
All right, so this helps, the fact that they're the first mover with a lot of locations, whether they're building stores, whether it's kiosks, whether it's new channels, airlines, grocery stores, the fact that they're there now makes it hard for a second mover to come in because they already have lots of coffee shops. And so if you're going to go in, there aren't that many locations that are available that might be good locations for coffee shops. Okay. All right, so Adam, I want to turn now to, here Starbucks is chugging along, they're doing well, and they have this opportunity to do a deal with McDonald's. And this would be another channel for their product. So my question to you is, would you want to do the deal with McDonald's? Are you for that deal, or are you against that deal, and why?
I would say I'm for the deal.
Okay.
The largest reason I'd be for the deal is because McDonald's is one of their largest, possibilities of a distribution chain. McDonald's is all over the world, so if they can get into McDonald's, that'll even help them get into some foreign market where they're not currently.
Okay, so you like the McDonald's deal, and the primary reason is because McDonald's is big.
Yeah.
So lots. So number one, it's sort of lots of locations out there, and it also helps you internationally. And you've got this international dimension to McDonald's. So it's like, hey, if we can sell Starbucks through that many different locations and get international, we should do it.
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody disagree? Brandon?
Well, I don't necessarily disagree, but I think one thing to consider is that Starbucks' brand is so valuable to it, and mixing it with McDonald's might pollute that brand in a way where
It might?
it will. Well, it will. I mean,
I don't know, there's a question.
it would. Okay, it would.
You think it would?
Well, it would make it seem inferior quality-wise. Cheap. McDonald's goes for like the cheap, somewhat good tasting food. And Starbucks is not trying to send that message.
So would you do the deal or not? Would you do the deal with McDonald's?
I'd probably not, I guess.
Probably not? I mean,
I don't know.
no,
I would not do the deal.
You would not do the deal.
No.
Derek, would you do the deal?
I think there are some markets where you could do the deal, some international markets. Because, okay, first of all, McDonald's is trying to move up market and who they're offering to.
Okay.
That's not going to work very well in the US. I mean, they've tried with the Mac Cafe and whatnot, but they have a pretty solid brand image.
Okay,
But
so you want to propose if we could do the deal internationally but not in the US?
Yes, and
You
only
like
in
that.
very
Fine.
select international markets. There are some
Okay.
places where McDonald's does have the brand image
Okay,
they're looking
this
for.
is a very reasonable
That is
way to think about proceeding, but McDonald's says no way.
All or nothing.
Why would McDonald's say no way?
Because they need Starbucks to pull their brand up, and they want to do
That's
it here.
the point,
Exactly.
right? The point is not to help
So-
us internationally, the point is to help us in the US,
Right.
right? In particular, where we have this big market and where Starbucks actually brings us a lot of brand cachet, right? Because
Right.
Starbucks brand cachet is in the US, it's not so much internationally. They would prefer to do it here and not internationally.
Exactly.
In some ways, right? So let's say you propose that, but they say no, we either do it in all McDonald's outlets or none.
No, it's absolutely not.
And you'd say none? Or
None.
would you do the deal?
No, of course not.
Why would you not do the deal? So the cons are, you and Brandon are saying,
The cons are we want to leverage our brand more. That is our biggest opportunity for using our current resources most efficiently in our growth and sustaining it. And
so you think this hurts our brand by doing this, by
Yes.
selling Starbucks, and so you think this is a deal killer? That it
Yes.
hurts our brand too much? Okay?
I think one of these things as well that we have to look at is cannibalization of our current sales revenues.
Okay?
Like if, there's a lot of locations where there's McDonald's and right next door there's a Starbucks. If we're serving Starbucks in both, McDonald's is going to start getting a cut of our revenue. Because obviously, when we make that kind of a merger or agreement, partnership to sell our coffee inside their stores, they're going to get, a cut of every sale that they bring into those stores. So we're actually, I think, cannibalizing our store.
Do you think that's really a big problem?
I think that for Starbucks it would be.
Okay.
I think for McDonald's, they say great, more sales. But for Starbucks,
Why would someone, if you have a choice between a Starbucks store and a McDonald's store, why would you choose McDonald's? Drive-through. So you're thinking it may be quicker or maybe more convenient. So you get some people who say, I just don't want to wait in a Starbucks line, so I'd rather get it quicker through McDonald's.
I think also if you can I think that also, like they were saying, dilutes our brand image, not just because like they're selling it and we're associated with them, but also we're not able to give them the experience that we give in our Starbucks stores.
Okay, so you don't give them the experience.
Now that we're in McDonald's, we're no longer able to give them that experience through the drive-through, and it's just another cup of coffee.
Let me ask, right now, if you had to vote on whether to do a deal with McDonald's, how many of you would say, yes, I would do the deal with McDonald's? Okay, Amber and Adam are the only brave souls who will say, would you say yes?
Yeah, I'd say yes as well.
Yes?
I have a question.
Garrett?
I'm assuming McDonald's is not interested in taking on, for example, our Meridian sub-brand that we sell at Costco.
No, that would be another, try and give them another brand, but they want the Starbucks, that's the point. The Starbucks brand helps build their cachet. So, all right, so for the three of you who are saying, yes, I think it's a good deal, let's convince the others. Convince the others that they're wrong.
I don't think it's going to hurt the brand as much as we think. Because people go to Starbucks because they want to get their coffee as close as they possibly can. They want the convenience, and if they want the environment, they're still going to go to Starbucks to get the environment. But if we put our product in McDonald's as well, we immediately have our product in so many more locations of people who want coffee that they know is going to taste like Starbucks, they can still go and get it. That way we don't have to invest also in the capital of building and expanding all of our buildings. It's already there. And so people who just want coffee fast can go to McDonald's, and people who still want the environment can still go to Starbucks.
Okay, so you're saying that actually you think a lot of the customers are segmented in terms of whether they prefer to go to a Starbucks and get the atmosphere, or someone else who just wants to get the coffee. In fact, if you look at across the United States, there are tons and tons of cities where there are no Starbucks stores, right? But there are McDonald's. You look at all of rural America, Midwest. I mean, there's a huge number of McDonald's outlets where there are no Starbucks today. Now, downtown cities, there might be some overlap, but perhaps not a lot. Let me go back to Andrew and Derek and Brandon. How many outlets are you giving up? In other words, how many McDonald's stores are there out there that would now be selling Starbucks coffee? Do you know?
Like 1,000? I don't know. I have to look it up.
Can anybody look up how many?
Well, I think just like the standard McDonald's, I'd say, is always billion served.
Yeah, but how many? So how many Starbucks stores are out there? At the writing of the
In the U.S.
There were about 1,000. There were 900 when they wrote it.
900 Starbucks stores.
And they predicted they could support 2,000 about.
They're looking at 2,000 stores by the year 2000. And how many McDonald's? Somebody look.
34,492.
34,492 McDonald's stores worldwide. So you have 1,000 stores, and you have an opportunity to sell your coffee through 34,000 McDonald's stores. And Andrew and Derek, you think that's a bad idea?
Yes.
I still think that's.
You still think it's a bad idea?
Yes, I do.
Is there a way we can make it a win-win, like splitting the McDonald's store for an area of Starbucks? You know, they do that with KFC sometimes, where we can keep the colors, keep the brand, keep the service.
So you do a store within a store, like a little Starbucks
Is that an option? I mean, that could solve a lot of the problems we're talking about.
That would be an option, but when you think about what McDonald's is getting here, it's not like you're going in and you're getting the mocha cappuccino with the latte at McDonald's. You're getting Starbucks, you're getting like 1 or 2 basic blends of Starbucks coffee. They don't have the ability to do, they're not trying to do a whole range of coffee products. They have people that come in and they want to get some good coffee with that Egg McMuffin or whatever their breakfast is. So you're only giving them 2 or 3 blends. It's not like, but you could say, maybe we should actually try and somehow create a little bit of the Starbucks experience in a McDonald's store where they actually could get multiple blends, and maybe we want to do that. So that could be another option, but you're still in a McDonald's store. And you're still dealing with a McDonald's, the question is, does that fit with the typical McDonald's clientele?
Because if we can't do that, I would say in the short term, if we can just increase our channels of distribution by that much, the short term would be fantastic. But in the long term, I think that's the beginning of the end of Starbucks.
Okay, so you're saying it's going to hurt our brand over the long run, but you admit sort of in the short run, this is going to generate lots of sales.
Because in the short run, the brand is consistent. In the short run, people are saying, "Oh, great, Starbucks and McDonald's. I don't have to drive over there now. I can just get it where I go to breakfast anyway." That'd be a good thing.
Okay, so the short run, this pumps sales, but there's this question about, does it actually hurt your brand over the long run and hurt your ability to sell product over the long run?
And I think that's actually the choice. If you partner with McDonald's, you're going to cease to be Starbucks. You might be able to make more money, you might be able to be more profitable with McDonald's, but you probably have to end up becoming an exclusive McDonald's supplier of coffee, because you're probably going to lose those 1,000 stores. I mean, just thinking of the people who go to Starbucks are they're the uppity, they're the luxury people who want to look cool with their Starbucks mug.
You're saying that you don't think they're your typical McDonald's customer?
No, I think they actually would be appalled if they saw Starbucks in McDonald's.
So you think it could actually hurt your sales? The people would say, if you can get Starbucks at McDonald's, I'm no longer going to even go to the Starbucks store where I like the atmosphere and everything else.
They'll look for another brand.
That they might look for another option. John?
Yeah, I don't think the switching costs are very high for a customer. Where, I went to Starbucks when I was sold at McDonald's, like he was saying. It's easy for them to switch over, and in the case it talks about...
But if you're happy with Starbucks and it's convenient for you, you're actually going to say, I'm not going to go there because they sell at McDonald's? I mean, you think people are actually going to just say, I won't go get the coffee I've always liked at this location where I've always gone because I'm so upset that they're selling Starbucks at McDonald's?
Where I grew up, the people that in high school that were all drinking the Starbucks, I think they would do that. Because they're actually like anti-McDonald's. They actually hate McDonald's, and so if they saw it going on, they might
And
do it.
it talks about on regional markets that Starbucks, that actually these regional players do really well against Starbucks. And it's actually the case how they were trying to make a more national brand. But yeah, there are these very fickle customers that I think would switch over because they go to Starbucks for the experience. They go there because there's a lot of options. Whereas if it was at McDonald's, you lose both those things. You lose the experience of going to a Starbucks, and you lose the experience of being able to get, I don't know, a strawberry, whatever.
So because you don't control the experience and you don't control the sort of options that people can buy, then people that go and experience Starbucks in a McDonald's, it may not, somehow it doesn't resonate that it's not as good. Somehow. Okay, Nathan?
I think a big concern might be that Starbucks is very selective in the coffee beans they purchase, and if they suddenly have to supply 34 times more coffee beans, then their quality of coffee is going to go down.
Can they maintain quality, right? Can they maintain the quality if they go to McDonald's and are now selling that much coffee? So that's a real question, I guess. I don't know that we know what the answer would be or how much you could tell the difference. Would that change for you, Adam or Amber? Would that change for any of you the equation of whether you?
Yeah, if that's a problem, I think that would not be a problem. If they're then getting a Starbucks cup of coffee and they don't like it, that poses a problem for us. 'Cause I think one of the largest advantages of going with McDonald's, people then that wouldn't typically be a Starbucks customer, try that, and they're like, wow, I like this. I want to go see what the Starbucks experience is. This was a really good cup of coffee, way better than what I was getting at McDonald's before. Because it's kind of like what they're already doing with Pepsi, right? Like they're already selling, Starbucks in Walmarts and these gas stations, and people they separate that mentally. It's two different experiences. Like, yes, I'm buying a Starbucks cup of coffee. I like the taste. If I want the Starbucks experience, they know that's a whole separate thing if I want to go to the store, and that drives them to it.
Yeah, so Nathan, what's the difference between going to McDonald's? You're already selling it at grocery stores.
But they
You're
also
already selling it at United Airlines. I mean, those are not like highbrow, distribution channels, right? So it doesn't seem like it's that far off to go to McDonald's.
Except for, again, we're looking at the volume.
The volume. So
34 times.
the question is, will people really be able to tell the difference? And I'm not sure it'll be 34 times because the Starbucks stores are devoted 100% to selling Starbucks. So, but it might be 5 or 10 times the total amount. Okay, Scott?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit different than going to a grocery store. Like, those aren't necessarily highbrow, but I think a lot of people see McDonald's as really lowbrow. I mean, these people are getting sued by PETA like every other day and stuff. And so the people that go to Starbucks are like the exact opposite kind of people. There's people that are suing McDonald's because of something doing to whoever and whatever, I don't know.
I thought it was mostly because the coffee was too hot. You sue McDonald's because the coffee was too hot, right?
Yeah, and so I feel like there's a pretty big difference from going just to like a supermarket. And
So you think that there's like distribution channels that maybe have no cachet to McDonald's that has low cachet?
Yeah, there's
so you think
negative.
it actually
Yeah.
conflicts
And
with the brand?
Yeah, and I think also it'd be really hard for them to control quality. Like just the very beginning of the case where the CEO went and bought coffee at the campus coffee shop, and they said they had Starbucks coffee and everything, and it was horrible. It was nothing like Starbucks coffee. I think you don't have trained baristas at McDonald's either.
But McDonald's is pretty good at training and making sure they have consistent quality. I mean, you'd think that
poor quality.
Yeah, well, they're consistent at what they do. Whether you like their quality or not, at least they're consistent at delivering it.
Exactly. So the question is whether or not they can achieve consistently good quality, and I think that's a big question.
Okay. Seth?
Yeah, it goes along with what Scott was saying. Just they can't control the quality along with the volume. I think that's an important point. But also, I mean, they go into they really try to hire the best baristas, and then they train them really well. They want to be able to be educated to give someone the exact kind of coffee that they want. And if they give it over to McDonald's, they can't.
They just can't
control that anymore.
Okay.
I don't think people going to McDonald's care about what kind of coffee they get. If you're buying a cup of coffee for $1, I don't think you're worried about the quality or the taste too much, versus like $5 at Starbucks, right? If you're willing to pay 5 times as much for your coffee, I don't think you're going to go to McDonald's for it because McDonald's is good at what they do. Super, super low prices for quality. You can count on whether it's perceived good or bad. Most people at Starbucks probably perceive it as terrible, and they're never going to go to McDonald's to begin with, nor to get their Starbucks from there. A lot of Starbucks have drive-through anyway, so it's convenient in that sense. But I don't think people going to McDonald's are gonna see, oh, it's Starbucks. They're gonna say, I want the coffee. It could taste terrible. I don't think they'd recognize the difference if they're eating at McDonald's.
Okay, who has not? Let me get who haven't called on yet today. Beck.
I think it could maybe pose a threat internationally if they're putting Starbucks in all the McDonald's, and there's McDonald's in a country where they don't have Starbucks yet. People get used to going to McDonald's for their Starbucks coffee. It's $1.50, and Starbucks enters the market. I'm gonna have to pay $7 for the same coffee at McDonald's. Like, I think that they're gonna already have that brand.
So it could hurt international expansion, perhaps. Because people are going to be introduced to Starbucks coffee through McDonald's as opposed to through a Starbucks store. Okay? Austin?
I'd like to know when coffee is purchased at Walmart. Like when? Is it through the drive-through? Is it in the morning? Stuff like that. If you know when, like you can kind of make a deal there. Because if you know that people are purchasing most of their coffee through the drive-through, then maybe you say, hey, Starbucks is offered from 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 or something like that.
And then after that, we don't have a trained barista anymore on the clock working with that coffee. So if you want your coffee early in the morning, that's when you're going to get it, and that way you get the drive-through. I don't know. It's like a potential.
So you're trying to see, is there some way we could provide the coffee, but have it be differentiated? It's for a different type of customer at a different time.
It's just in the morning when someone's going through the drive-through, you don't put the experience in the actual McDonald's. That way you're not trying to combine Starbucks experience with McDonald's.
Okay.
You don't advertise it in the store, but maybe through the drive-through.
Okay. Let's see, Taylor and then Christopher.
I would take a look at opportunity costs. We talked about McDonald's being in these markets that Starbucks is not.
Okay.
And if you sell your coffee through McDonald's, you're giving up the opportunity to move Starbucks into that market, to have those retail stores. And I would say the retail stores are much more profitable rather than just selling through McDonald's. And I think moving with McDonald's, you get a lot of uncontrolled growth that puts a strain on your distribution, and you give up that good quality that Starbucks is known for. And so I would say that, I mean, in the long term, like we talked about, it's going to be much more profitable and safer to simply use the Starbucks model instead of, I mean, running through McDonald's in these new markets.
So Taylor, those of you who are saying let's not do it are implicitly saying we think we have better ways to grow, right? Because I would assume that you better have better ways to grow, otherwise we'd want to think about doing the deal with McDonald's. How would you think about if you were running Starbucks, looking for growth opportunities? Because it's this the opportunity cost. So do you have any sort of a framework or way of thinking about how do they look for opportunities to grow if they're now going to say we're not going to do the McDonald's, we're going to forego the 34,000 distribution outlets for our product. We can continue to grow our stores, of course.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other ways to think about growth?
I would segment it into, well, I mean, within the retail stores, I would take a look at our customers specifically.
Okay.
I know Starbucks really focuses on the coffee aspect,
Okay.
and maybe that's something McDonald's could offer is you get coffee with something else now. So Starbucks could take a look at into adding complementary items with their coffee. I'm sure they do a little bit, but they could expand that product selection to, I mean, get more sales per customer within
Sure.
those stores. And so you can take a look. I think it's important to note that, I mean, a lot of the growth that Starbucks has seen has been appendages to their core business, but McDonald's would be more replacing their core business. And so, I mean, I would still focus on those adjacent customer spaces rather than putting at risk your core business.
Okay, so one thing you could do is you could build more Starbucks stores as a way to grow, right? Another thing you could do, you were sort of saying, what else does someone buy when they buy
Right.
coffee?
Expand the product.
Right, so there's this sort of like, what else would someone want to buy if they're buying coffee? And we've seen Starbucks add sandwiches and muffins and brownies and other sort of food, right? So it's sort of, well, what else can we sell a customer who's coming in to buy coffee? Right, that would be another way to think about food products. So that might be a way to think about growth. How else could you think about
I was going to just talk about these adjacent markets.
the adjacent markets?
Yeah, same thing with that.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead. Talk about what do you think about in terms of adjacent markets?
Well, one thing they actually did recently is they bought Tea Havana, so they moved into the tea market, which is very similar to coffee. So
Okay.
they're in that market now too.
Okay, so they went into the tea market, which is sort of, again, certainly related to coffee. Okay, so that's one way. What else? What other, do you see any other adjacencies?
Yeah, so when Howard Schultz started Starbucks, it was because he noticed that people in Europe had this job to be done of having the coffee shop cafe experience.
Okay.
And we already have these retail outlets, and so a couple adjacencies that I'm really interested in is furniture and decor. I have a showroom already built, and it's fully functional. Customers can come in and enjoy
They
this.
can try it.
They can try the furniture and then buy it and put it in their house.
So it's like buy Starbucks at home, not just the coffee. you can have the whole living room, right? Your office can be like this, right?
Totally, and it's still, it's utilizing their core competency of the brand image and the.
So somehow they
same
have to
job
use
to
this
be
to
done.
understand their sort of core customer that wants to come in and have this coffee experience. And now you try and extend that to say, well, what do they, if they like our atmosphere coffee, or the atmosphere we're providing, maybe they'd want to take that atmosphere and take that and put that into their home. So you create a line of sort of furniture and decor that is from Starbucks. Okay, now that's an adjacency that is not coffee related, right? At all. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think another
Sam.
potential non-coffee related adjacent market could be arts and entertainment.
Okay.
Just judging by people that I know that are Starbucks diehards, I think if you sold indie films or any unique books, yeah, but it wants to be a community meeting place. And so I think it could help accomplish the mission of being a community meeting place.
Okay, so this is one of the interesting things is they actually did create their music bar for a period of time. What they called their music bar, where you could go in and you could get custom CDs, and they have music that would play, and people could go get custom CDs. And this was sort of before digital, completely took off. And now it's like if you want a book, you may not want a hard copy, you may want a digital copy, or the same would be true for music. But certainly there's this notion that maybe you could create some sense of community, right? And that somehow people in the Starbucks community like similar kinds of things, like maybe people in a Harley-Davidson community like similar things. So maybe around arts and entertainment we could sell different things there. All right, what other options, Samantha?
We know that currently they're in the specialty coffee, but there's also the whole basic coffee. There's like 60% of the coffee market. There's a larger part in just basic coffee. So they could leverage their core competencies to kind of move into that area as well.
Okay.
So maybe through acquisitions or something of, Arthur talks about maybe acquiring Folgers or some basic coffee brand and using their current strengths for something like that.
So they could actually, we want to have a different brand here. Although there is another way you could think about doing this. You could flip this and say, you know what, we're going to do the deal with McDonald's. Starbucks is going to be our basic coffee from now on. And then you could launch a super premium brand that comes out above Starbucks that you only offer at the Starbucks stores. So that would be another way. What if you did that? Does that change any of your minds as to whether you'd want to do the deal with McDonald's?
You're still paired with McDonald's.
You're still paired with McDonald's, but you can say, look, Starbucks it's a basic, it's a good coffee. If you want now the super premium stuff, you come to Starbucks, and I don't know whether it's Starbucks Blue or Premium or whatever you want to call it, but you have a separate premium brand that doesn't go through McDonald's.
That's what I was thinking initially, but like Starbucks has this huge quality thing. They're like, we're the best coffee for the experience, for this price and stuff. Would they really want to differentiate in that direction and have something that's of less quality associated with their name?
So what I'm just suggesting is, one growth option is you say you do something, a more basic coffee, and you have a lower brand, right? You have a different brand, and you keep your premium brand. But another way is if you think that your premium brand is already somewhat diluted, right? It's already pretty ubiquitous. What you might do is say, okay, this becomes Starbucks sort of everywhere, but then you could launch a super premium brand. It's sort of like, Marriott has Ritz-Carlton, right? Marriotts are nice, but Ritz-Carltons are a little step above, right? A Marriott. So that would be another way to think about trying to differentiate your Starbucks stores that can only carry the super premium coffee brand that you have. Sure.
So we have Starbucks. I think making like a Star Sense cheapo brand kind of thing would be a little bit value. Just like we read about Reebok and Nike. We have Nike. They have their core competency. They're making sports shoes, right? And they're only going staying in that sports type of arena. Reebok, who was ahead of Nike at one point, started trying to differentiate a little bit too much, where they got away from this central thing and tried to branch out into something completely different when they got into, I think the specific branch like Sperry's, kind of casual shoes. And Nike, as they stayed in that specific core competency and was able to repeat that process over and over, refine it over to Reebok. I think we have a similar thing with Starbucks. Starbucks, the specialty coffee, attributes to this unique experience that they're selling to their customers. And I think that selling this basic type of coffee product would not help as nearly as much as it would detract from this unique experience they're trying to sell.
So part of the question here is, do you want to just stay in the premium space? If you feel like you need to stay as a premium, you want to try and stay premium brand, a little more exclusive, you definitely don't do the McDonald's thing. If you decide, you know what, we want to be all over the coffee world, then maybe you actually think about doing Starbucks through McDonald's and grocery stores, and it's sort of the ubiquitous brand, and then maybe you try and create something that may be a more elite that you could put just in your stores. It's a gamble, right? There's no question it's a gamble. But it could lead to far more revenues and far more profits.
I think that is a gamble, just because I'm from Seattle, and there's Starbucks everywhere in Seattle.
Starbucks everywhere, yeah.
It's almost like, for example, I worked at the Republican Party. I recruit people there, and what we do is when we're interested in something, we take them to Starbucks. Not as cold as just like a regular interview, and not as intense as like lunch and so on. And it was seen as kind of a luxury, but it was an affordable luxury. It was like a nice thing to do, but it didn't cost much money. And it filled a big need for businesses and organizations in Seattle and Bellevue that needed those kind of interactions. And so I think it's
a place you can go, get something, sit down, have a visit.
It's quick and it doesn't cost that much money, and it's seen as a nice gesture. And so I think if you went more premium, it may hurt that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, if I was an investor in Starbucks and I knew they passed on a deal with McDonald's, like, I'd probably fire a CEO or two, because if they had the opportunity to make a boatload of money and they didn't, I'm more on the idea that Starbucks could become this idea of coffee everywhere. I mean, they're an ice cream for crying out loud, so it's like, why are we branding this as the only coffee idea when the flavor, it can be everywhere, and then we're bringing it to a product? I think we could, it is a risk, obviously, but you could generate a significant amount of more revenue and profit by having that type of distribution. And then if you want to enter into a new market, you go into a different type of country that had no experience with specialty type of coffee stores, they knew that McDonald's was the distribution channel. You could leverage your distribution there and your group in those areas to start creating your own retail shops. So it could be we use McDonald's, we leverage them, but now thanks for getting us into everywhere, and now we're going to start doing our own shops and cancel the deal. We really wanted to.
So it's tough to turn down. You're thinking, you're turning down 5 to 10 times the revenues and profits. Probably at least in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
In the short run. And the question is, are you really willing to give up that much? Because that means your market value is probably going to at least triple.
Yeah.
Maybe go up 4 or 5 times what it is today. And your job is to grow market value. So for the rest of you, just think your market value 15 years in the future is going to be better by not doing it? Does anybody want to address that? You think you're going to be better off, Robert?
Well, one thing we talked about is, do they need this deal to grow? And I don't think so. I think that there's a lot of opportunity left in the basic coffee market, and still even left in the premium market. That sure, like this is an easy win for them now, but there's still a lot of growth that they could. I mean, they have 10,000 stores now. Starbucks does, and they had 1,000 then. So even then they had 10 times left to grow in 10 years. And so I don't think that they needed this deal.
So the fact that they had other opportunities to grow is what led you to believe we don't need to take this. We can grow profitably. We can control it a little bit.
And that will extend.
All right. two comments
In
here.
the case, it talks about how Starbucks has a very disciplined approach. In one of their statements, they talked about how they'd rather wait a few years to get a store that does $1 million in sales than have a store right now that does $750,000 in sales. And in doing the deal with McDonald's, the revenues will go up now, but it also alluded to, I think, in the future, in building those stores in those same locations. And that those stores, if you were to partner with McDonald's now, you would make less money now than making more money later by having your own.
So you think you actually would be better off 15 years from now, more profitable?
And it's part of the culture of Starbucks. It's like with Southwest, they could have grown a lot. If they would have done that, they probably wouldn't be as profitable now as they are today.
Okay.
And Starbucks is the same
Okay.
principle.
Did you, Adam, want to?
Well, this is actually a really weird thing about me. My dad is actually the guilty party in bringing Starbucks to Utah. And
guilty party.
I've actually had people tell us how like we're completely bad members of that. But within that deal, it was really interesting because you started to see, he tried to bring Starbucks in for a long time as a commercial real estate developer, and they didn't want to come for that reason. You know, we
Starbucks
got
didn't want to
that
come to
point
Utah?
of having not that profitable stores. We all know like, Starbucks in Utah is not going to be their best location. But they're now to that point, happened quite a few years ago now that Starbucks came. But it was like, okay, we need to start entering these new markets. We need to start finding growth opportunities. And so I really think they're at that point now with their growth. They need to find something new to really be able to spread into new markets because they've already started to really saturate the profitable, high-end markets. And I really think it would work if you do a premium brand like the black cup. I think it would even help people more wanting to go to the real Starbucks because it's like, okay, all my colleagues have the green cup they got at McDonald's, and I have the black cup here at work. I'm the top end. I go to the real Starbucks. And I think it would even drive up demand because it has that differentiating.
So this is a challenge facing executives is you have different options for growth, and you have to decide which ones are the best. In this particular case, they decided not to do the deal, and McDonald's launched their own brand of coffee, which by the way does very well in taste tests against Starbucks. What's that? It
does better.
It says that they actually beat Starbucks in a lot of the taste tests. So apparently they didn't run out of good coffee beans. So I don't know whether how different the coffee beans really are, or whether Starbucks could have somehow gone in and encouraged more growers, or maybe they could have even gone into the growing part of this if there were certain kinds of beans that they wanted more of. But that turns out wasn't a problem. These are choices, though, that companies have to make. In this particular case, I think they ended up thinking, I don't think we want to be that, we don't want to be that beholden to one distribution channel that will have a lot of bargaining power. And it will dilute our brand, and we'd rather control it, and so they decided not to do it. We don't know whether that, in terms of profitability, revenues and profitability, we don't know if that was the right decision or not. Maybe it was, maybe not. It'd be interesting to see where Starbucks would be today had they done this deal 10 years ago. What we can do is, though, we do want to look at this issue of how companies look to grow. And one of the ways you can think about it is you think about the resources and capabilities that a firm has. And you say, how can we leverage that to grow? So here, we're looking at, more Starbucks stores to try and find more of the same kind of customer. Here, what else can we sell to our existing customers? So another way to look at it is we have these customers that are our resource in a sense. They're an installed base. These folks are coming in. What else can we sell them? And so that's one way that you think about growing is what else can we sell our customer? Or we also can look at, well, what are our resources and capabilities? How could we leverage those? So we're good at doing coffee, so now we want to look at getting into any other coffee-related product, whether it's ice cream, frappuccino, it could be granola bars, it could be, there are a whole variety of other sort of coffee products that they could try and create that would allow them to extend their skill at coffee, right? So you think about, that would be one way to grow. Another is, let's leverage our locations. Maybe it's our locations and our customer. We've got lots of locations. We've got a lot of showrooms here, right? We could sell arts and entertainment products. We could do furniture. Maybe, I don't know whether they should put a red box in there, But maybe they could put a Starbucks in there with those indie films and other things. Maybe some unique things that people would want, right? But they could do, if you think about it, wouldn't that be kind of a good place for people if they're going to get coffee? Maybe they want to pick up a movie. And there are a lot of them, they're convenient. That's the way you look for growth. I mean, Redbox is doing pretty darn well. So you look for these different opportunities to grow, leveraging the resources you've built and the capabilities that you have built over time. How can we leverage that to grow in a new way? So let me just take a moment and share with you sort of a framework and a way to think about growing. One thing you can do is you basically take this inventory of your resources and capabilities and then ask yourself, is there a way we could leverage this resource to grow? Is there a way we could leverage this capability to grow? If they're really good at finding locations for Starbucks, maybe they should be in a consulting business for other food retailers, and they should basically sell that skill of helping retailers find good locations. So I think there are a variety of ways that they could look at sort of leveraging the capabilities that they have to try and grow, and that's really what you're trying to do as you look to grow. Once you've built some resources and capabilities, is what do we have that we can leverage in terms of a resource or a capability? Starbucks brand, our locations, our knowledge of coffee and coffee blends, things like that. So it looks like, let's see, it looks like this is not coming up, so we'll do this on the board. So another way to think about this notion of resources and capabilities is to think about, we're trying to expand. Another way to think about this is customers. What else can we sell to our existing customers? So Amazon's gone into a lot of different product categories over time because they just keep trying to find new things to sell to their existing customers. And this is why Amazon Prime is taking off, because, hey, if I can get, for $70, $80 a year, I can get free delivery, and the more and more and more stuff I buy, the more it leverages that payment of, $75, $80 for Amazon Prime, the better off I am buying more and more stuff from Starbucks. Second could be, I want to leverage my technologies, inputs, sort of processes. This is just a little bit way to think about resources and capabilities. So if you think about Apple, Apple was a computer company, but they were really good at writing software. They were really good at, they had to have hard drives and things in their computers. They took their knowledge of these inputs and technologies to create the iPod, because they were good at those sorts of inputs and technologies. And then they used those same to create the iPhone and the iPad. So when you think about some companies that expand their options, they're doing it because they're really good at certain technologies, certain processes. If we look at Honda going from motorcycles to cars to ATVs, they actually did get into boat motors, by the way, and even lawnmowers and other power mowers. This is where they're looking for growth because of the technologies, inputs, processes that they have. Another way to think about it is there a way to leverage channels or locations to the customer? So cable TV companies used to just do cable TV. They just bring you TV, but now, what else do they bring you? Internet? Phone? Yeah. So now they've become a channel to bring you other services into your home. So they've moved from not just being a channel for cable TV, but now we're a channel we can bring you, in some ways, adding products and services to the same customer. But now you can get at least 3 main services, and then they try and do a bundled pricing as well. Another way that companies can think to grow is from knowledge of specific markets. So if you go to India or South Korea, you're going to see some companies like the Tata Group or Birla Group in India, where they actually are in everything from steel to appliances to cars to retail stores. They have all these different kinds of products that they sell in the Indian market. And the reason they say it makes sense for them to do it is because they know how to sell to the Indian customer. They know the Indian customer better than sort of anybody else, and they sell all of these different products to them. So they're leveraging knowledge of the customer and a particular market to grow. So that's another way to think about growth. Let me just conclude by saying, if you leverage what you currently have, then let's see if this light's still not coming. If you leverage what you currently have, most of what your growth will be incremental. So it's hard. It's going to be product line extension. So if you think about companies that have grown well over the last decade are companies that actually come out with brand new products or brand new services that they put that new S-curve on top of the old one. So Amazon started with books, right? But then they add on all these other product categories. Then they add on Kindle, Kindle Fire. They add on Amazon Web Services. These are whole different businesses that they add one on top of the other, and that's what helps them to really grow because they're building brand new capabilities and new resources all the time. They're not just leveraging the old ones. So I think that's one thing to be aware of. I think that's true with Apple. They didn't just stay in computers and continue to do product line extensions with laptops and tablets. Their growth has really been largely, in music and with phones. And they've had to build new capabilities in those areas. So if you want to be good at growing, you not only have to be good at leveraging what you do, but you have to be thinking about what kinds of new resources and capabilities can we and should we try and build before anybody else to continue to grow, to offer new things to the market. Okay, we'll see you next Monday. Tuesday.